Hello guys, welcome back to another tutorial. Hit the bell icon button so that you don't miss out any tutorial.
In this lesson, I'm going to demonstrate and talk about PHP variables. Important concept. We know what variables are. They store data, piece of information, right? So how does it fit into the PHP world? So here I'm going to demonstrate by writing a simple program using PHP so you understand what this program does, how variables work in PHP. So let's go ahead and I'm going to create a new file. So within my intro folder, we earlier created the first PHP program.php. Here I'm just going to right click on the same folder, click on new file, so everything stays within the same htdocs tutorial and intro folder. And I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to go ahead and call it variable, or PHP variable rather, and then .php. Now it's important to note that you must also enter the extension, otherwise the editor is not going to recognize this. Okay, so hit the enter key, and here we have the PHP variable.php, a blank file. So recall from the previous lesson, first things first, we need to open the PHP tag, and we do this by the less than sign, question mark, and then just typing PHP. That's all there is to it. And of course there's a closing tag to this as well. But for right now, after PHP, I'm going to hit enter, and by default automatically the Atom editor also inserts the closing tag. So let's enter some spaces. So anything between these tags, right, is PHP code. So let's go ahead and create a variable. So a variable is something that stores a piece of information or some data. Now in PHP, a certain syntax is used to store variable, and that is using the string or the $sign. So we use the $sign and then name of the variable. Now certain naming conventions must be followed when you create names for your variables. So for example, I'm going to go ahead and create a variable starting with a string. That's my syntax, and I'm going to call it New York. So that's just my variable, and this equals, right, the variable has to store some information. So this statement or this variable New York equals, and then my string has to be in quotations, and I'm going to go ahead and say I love Big Apple, just the name, another name for New York. Okay, so, and of course one thing that we must also recall as part of the PHP syntax is we need the semicolon. Okay, it's important. So every time you write a statement, you need to create a semicolon. This basically tells that you need to go to the next line. Okay, so think of this as a period or a full stop or something like that, so it goes to the next line or next statement. So once I've defined the variable called New York, I love Big Apple, next I can also define a variable such as $sign, and I can have something like ABC, for example, equals, and then this could be the integer type. So if I create a value for the variable ABC as integer, this does not have to be in strings. Okay, in other words, in quotations, for example. So that's not the case. For integer, it's just a number. So for example, this could be 76 as the integer, and of course the semicolon. So once I create this, let me go ahead and create another one. So string, and this I'm going to say XYZ, just a name, and this could contain, let's say, a float number, so it'll be something like 10.9, for example, semicolon, and then my PHP tag is closed. So all I've done here is simply created these variables. So let me go ahead and save this. So Control S. Now there's some, as I mentioned earlier, naming conventions of using these variables. In other words, I could use New York, I could use ABC, XYZ, and any other names, but there are certain rules. And over time, as you write more code in PHP, you'll get experienced and you will memorize these rules. But I have these rules written down so we can go through them one at a time. So let me just move this aside here in the center. Perfect. So here are the rules for the PHP that we must follow. The variable starts with the $, followed by the name of the variable. So that's rule number 1, which we followed. Rule number 2, a variable name must start with a letter or the underscore character. Rule number 3, a variable name cannot start with a number. Rule number 4, a variable name can only contain alphanumeric characters and underscores. So you can have something like A through Z, 0 to 9, and underscore. Variable names are case sensitive. So if I were to use $age as being lowercase and $age as being uppercase are two different variables, even though they spell the same way. They're both age in spelling, but they're different variables just by changing the lowercase to uppercase. So just basic rules, and as you write more programs, they'll come natural to you. So for example, if I were to, let's say, go to New York and enter the underscore, that's a valid variable name. Similarly, I can work with ABC, I can do XYZ, and so on, right? So you get the idea. So make sure you keep these rules in mind when working with PHP. Okay, perfect. So let's go ahead and save this program. Let's execute this and see what happens. So I'm going to navigate back to my web browser. So once I'm in my browser, I'm going to go ahead and just go back here to my actual folder called the intro folder here and refresh, and I should be able to see the php variable.php file that we just created. If I were to click on this, obviously it's blank because nothing happens. And so far I've only done or declared the variables, but I did not use, recall, the print or the echo, right? So therefore the page stays empty. So I just wanted to demonstrate this, that just by declaring variables, nothing's going to happen until and unless you actually do the print statement as well. So let's navigate back to our code. So in this lesson, just wanted to demonstrate the basic concept of PHP variables and some of the rules. So practice, and let's move to the next lesson. In this lesson, I will talk about what a PHP function is and how does it work. So let's jump right in. I'm going to go ahead and create a new file. Right click on the intro folder, choose new file, and give it a name. I'm going to go ahead and call it my function.php. Hit the enter key on the keyboard, and of course it creates a new file. So first things first, open the PHP tag, less than sign, question mark, PHP, and of course it automatically places the end tag as well. So let's enter some lines here so we can start writing our code. Let me first go ahead and show you something called writing a comment, right? So whenever you like to, let's say, write a comment in your code, we start with the / and then the asterisk. Okay, notice how it changes the color, right? So / as soon as I use the asterisk sign, it changes the color. So the editor tells me that now this is going to be a comment. So I'm going to go ahead and say defining our first PHP function. And then once I'm done, I need to use the asterisk again and then the / again. So this is how you would in fact write comments within your code. And what are comments? These are simply statements or text that does not affect your code at all. So it's just like giving a title or a heading in plain English language, so that whoever is looking at your code, they know exactly what you're doing within this particular block of code or these lines of code. So straightforward comments, nothing fancy. So it's a good idea to use comments, by the way. Every time you write code, it's a good idea to use comments so that you can actually remember yourself, and for other users as well, or other developers or programmers who take a look at your code so they can understand the logic. So I just placed a comment called defining our first PHP function. So let's go ahead, and the function is what I use, and notice it changes the color in purple, right? So that's the syntax for creating a function. So you just type function space and then provide a name of the function. So I'm going to go ahead and call it my first function. And the syntax is a set of parentheses. And once again, it changes color to blue. So as soon as a set of parentheses, PHP knows that it's a function. Now, before I move forward, what really is a function? So PHP functions are similar to, let's say, other programming languages. A function is a piece of code which takes one or more input in the form of a parameter and does some processing and then returns a value. So think of this as like a box that contains certain things, right? Like a few pieces of Lego, and you just fit those pieces together and you give it a sequence, right? So just a small package, so to speak. Think of that, of a function, what it does. So within the function, for example, I can have parameters, which I'm going to demonstrate in the next lesson, but within these set of parentheses I can also have additional parameters. But here, just a basic function with no parameters. So that's what the function in PHP does. It's just a code which takes more than one input in the form of parameter and does some processing and returns a value. And we've seen functions, maybe you might have seen functions in other programming languages and so on. And in PHP, just plain and simple, easy to create a function. So here we just created a function called my first function with a set of parentheses, and then we open the curly braces, something new. So the curly braces, you need to note that while creating a function, its name should start with the keyword function, which is in purple, right? So that's called a keyword. These are built-in keywords that we must use. Once we use the built-in keyword, it has to start with that. And all of the PHP code should be put inside the curly braces. And that's important. So this is just a basic syntax whenever you use a function. So I just created a curly braces, and if I hit enter, so everything that goes from the first curly braces, starting at this point and where I end my curly braces, everything in between will be part of the function. And of course, the entire function is part of the PHP tags. So that's how it works. So once I open the curly braces, then I'm going to go ahead and write something within the curly braces, right? So here I'm going to go ahead and simply do a printout, echo, and then quotations. I'm going to say PHP is an easy yet powerful language. Make sure my spellings are correct. Perfect. So, and of course, one thing's missing, right? The semicolon. You must have that. And then I'm going to go ahead and close the curly braces. So this function contains just a simple print statement. Now we're not done yet. Once you define a function, we need to call a function as well. And what do I mean by calling a function? That means you've told the box, right, the elements within the box to be in certain order to do something, and then you have to call out to that box. In other words, tell the box to run, tell the box to do something, or whichever the contents of that box are, they need to be activated, right? So that's called basically calling a function. So to call a function, it's just straightforward. Let me first place a comment one more time. So it's /*. Here's how you would call a function. So once I'm done with this comment, use the asterisk and then of course the slash again. Perfect. And then in order to call a function, what do? You simply just type the name of the function again with a semicolon. That's all. So here the name is my first function, set of parentheses, and then semicolon. So here I'm going to go ahead and fix up my comment because I need a space here. Perfect. So that we remain consistent. And once I'm done with this, just bring up my PHP tag. So once I have this, my first function, and I called this function, right? I'm going to go ahead and save it. And then let's go ahead and execute this. So I'm going to go back to my browser here. Just refresh so that all contents within the intro folder are current. And here's my function.php. If I were to click on it, notice it says PHP is an easy yet powerful language. So let's navigate back to our code. So here, notice all I did was print it out, right? That's all I did. Now, of course, here I'm strictly showing you PHP. If you need to use HTML, for example, and add titles or CSS, you're more than welcome to do so. And I demonstrated this in one of the earlier lessons. But I'm strictly focusing and just on pure PHP code. So here in this lesson, we talked about what a function is and how to define the function and call a function.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If you like the video, do give us a thumbs up and share it. Also check out amazing discounts and offers on our premium courses in the description below.